Our next speaker, Shree Alok Tripathi, is the director of Center for Archaeology and Museology at Assam University, Department of History, Institute of Archaeology. He is also chairing as a professor and a former departmental head of history of Assam University. Professor
Yeah.
Tripathi has also served the post of the superintending archaeologist at Underwater Archaeology Wing of Archaeological Survey of India, where he was associated with the underwater cultural heritage in Indian waters, underwater excavations in Indian Ocean and intermediate waters, planning and implementation of policies, training of professionals, development of underwater archaeology, and so now I welcome Mr. Tripathi for this talk. Okay.
Namaskar to everyone, and I would be speaking about underwater cultural heritage. My previous speaker was telling that how the situation are going wrong, and if it continues like this, after some time, Kolkata is going to be underwater, or many other coastal cities. So you can take it as its extension. I'm going to talk about those old cities which are underwater, and would like to speak about other cultural heritage which is lying submerged. So I'll be talking about the underwater cultural heritage in India. This is a very favorite quote by one of the earliest archaeologists, and particularly for the youngers. And it gave me a lot of encouragement when I started working, and I want everybody should keep this in mind. And you may find certain statements may be different than what you have read somewhere or you have heard somewhere. So that may be out of that. So when we talk about underwater cultural heritage, we are talking about traces of human existence, of cultural, historical, or archaeological character, which have been underwater for at least 100 years. And this submergence may be regularly, or it may be the partially, or maybe periodically. So things which have gone underwater, submerged for last 100 years, they are being considered as underwater cultural heritage as it is defined in the UNESCO Convention. If you look at India, its position is very prominent in Indian Ocean. We are surrounded with water. Generally, we say three sides, but if you see the Brahmaputra in the east and Indus on the west, so everywhere we have water. We are surrounded with water. We have a deep relation with the water. And at present, our coastline is more than 7,500 kilometers long. We have 1,197 islands scattered on close to eastern and western coast. And the water area is almost 2.1 million square kilometers. So it's a huge area. And this water area is very rich when we talk about the underwater cultural heritage, because we have a very long maritime history. We can trace it very conveniently up to 5,000 years. It definitely goes beyond that. And then there were hundreds of minor and major ports, not only on the coast, but on the rivers and many other on the water bodies. This one image just tells about some of the important sites along the coast. And let me tell you that not much work have been done so far, because whatever have been done in last 40 years, it's a very, it's not sufficient. It's a very preliminary. And if we work, then we will find thousands of sites scattered in our water area. So it's extremely rich. And when we talk about the culture, underwater culture, not only the sea, generally that is another perception. When we talk about underwater, people generally think that marine archaeology. or the sites or material in the seas, but that's not the case. Even our internal waters are extremely rich. We have got many rivers, lakes, reservoirs, a number of tanks, wells, and many other bodies which also are equally important when we talk about the underwater cultural heritage. And another associated branch of which is very, you can say, a sister discipline is the nautical archaeology, which includes the study of the old boats and ships, navigation, and things related to that. So that also we have a long history, and we have a very rich material evidence for that in various forms. And when we start doing underwater exploration, we are very hopeful that can get physical remains of these boats and ships of very early time. I just want to touch a brief history that how this branch has developed. It was in 1981 the first underwater archaeological investigations were carried out of Tamil Nadu coast, where the geophysicists of the National Institute of Oceanography they were asked to search for the submerged remains of a legendary city, that is the Pumpuhar, which is mentioned in Sangam literature. And that was the time when the United Nations has Convention on the Law of the Sea. So that was the time where people were thinking about the marine resources and its importance. And then that consciousness was developing in India also. And when this branch was started, there was no experience, there was no long-term plan, it was just a project. And this project started for the search of certain well-known important sites. And this is one old document, which was the first proposal to start marine archaeological studies in Indian water. And when these kind of pictures came from the bottom of the sea, they created a lot of excitement, not only in archaeologists and historians, but in a common man. And that gave a lot of boost to the study of underwater archaeology. And people were very excited to find or to see these or search and these submerged cities, ports, shipwrecks. And generally, when you talk about shipwrecks, people have an image of treasure ships laden with gold and silver and whatnot. But it's not actually like that. So in the next decade, there were more training programs, international collaborations, and that archaeologists were going slowly deeper and deeper. And we were making certain advances, but that were not on the speed which we require in a country like India, having such a vast water area. 2001 can be considered as one of the important year, because that was the year when UNESCO adopted 2000, means that UNESCO Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage. So that is the first international convention what we have around the world, and there are now more than 60 states which have ratified this convention. And that was the year when Archaeological Survey of India established underwater archaeology wing. And once this wing was established, underwater archaeological activities were systematized, they were properly monitored, and implementation of law began. And from there, the proper systematic underwater excavations started. And there was one more thing, that was the collaboration between Archaeological Survey of India and Indian Navy. And collaboration is a need of the hour. The time has gone where individual, either persons or institution, used to work. Now in the scientific research, or if you are doing something, you need expertise from various experts from various institutions, state infrastructure. And if you start developing your own, it is going to cost a lot and becomes very difficult. So the best option is that you collaborate. So this collaboration worked wonderfully. And from 2001, a number of excavations were conducted in the Arabian Sea, as well as in Bay of Bengal and in internal waters. So I would be just touching and showing you some of these major works. which were carried out. The first excavation was of a shipwreck of Lakshadweep Island. And this is a place around 450 nautical mile away from the east coast, the mainland. And here it's a small coral island, and on the outer reef of this, a shipwreck was noticed in 1990, which was then investigated. And then it took some time. When this wing was established, excavation started. And it's a beautiful place. The pictures you are seeing are means they are something very rare, because generally you don't get so means such a beautiful pictures underwater. Visibility is not that good, you don't have clarity, but being it away from the shore and being it in the coral island, it was the water is extremely clear. uh, as I have mentioned, we were having collaboration with the Indian Navy. So we used their survey ship, and this whole area was thoroughly, very systematically and scientifically uh, surveyed. And after that, the excavation started. For excavation, also a special diving ship was used. This ship has all state-of-the-art facilities for diving, going deep, very deep. And this site which we excavated, the shipwreck, it goes almost to 65 meter. That's a very deep when we talk about underwater, because beyond 40 working is challenging. But because we had these facilities, we had trained divers, and they were given exposure to archaeological excavations, and with that, we had a very strong team, and we carried out excavations underwater using different kind of diving equipments depending on the need of the work. And then this coral reef, which you can see before excavation, how it looks, the whole reef was explored properly, and it was properly documented, because documentation is of prime importance when we talk about archaeological works. And all the objects which were found lying on the reef or the slopes, they were properly documented in situ without disturbing them. They were properly numbered, photographed, measured, their positions were fixed, and after that, for our test pits were dug on in a very limited area. For that, we had a proper planning, proper layout of the trenches, so that we know the locations where the work was done, and in a very controlled manner excavations were carried out, because these are the coral reef. So having means disturbing that environment there would have been disastrous. So we took every care that we work in an area so that the living corals are not disturbed. And keeping that in the mind, very systematically we carried out some excavations using mechanical devices or the manual methods. And then these are the cannons which were, you can see here, we got a number of cannons which were carried on the shipwreck, on the ship. So this is one group which is a very prominent, visible on the surface. So they were excavated and cleaned. And when we went down, we got a variety of pottery. We had many objects. We had porcelain on that, copper objects, glass objects, a lot of objects made of copper, which helped us in dating the ship. And then finally, we also had a bell of the ship, which was inscribed with the name of the ship and the date. So we could identify with that. So this was first excavation to a very deep, around 55 meter. And that we also lifted one of the cannon, which was around 1.5 ton in weight. So that was more to test our capabilities of working underwater. And then we carried out this very successfully. So it gave us a lot of confidence. And let me tell you, this is the deepest excavation carried out in this Asia Pacific region. There are many other excavations which are in shallower water, but this was one of the deepest excavation which we conducted. The second, another excavation which we carried out was near Mahabalipuram on the east coast. I need not to tell its location. It's a very famous place, inscribed World Heritage List, and famous for these Pallav temples here. And there were legends that there is a submerged city, and during the low tides, their tops of certain submerged rocks and structures are visible. So we carried out, and when you survey on the coast during low tide, you will find such kind of architectural fragment clearly suggesting that there was certain structure which have been destroyed or submerged. So after doing this, our preliminary work, then we decided to go deep and then explore that what is there near this area. And we used an amphibious ship because this area is quite shallow, very close to the shore. So we needed a ship which can come to a very shallow water. And again, this was a work in collaboration with Indian Navy. And there are these kind of certain rocks. So during the low tide, their tops are visible. And there are a number of them. There are two such series of rocks there. So they are very prominent. And then we carried out diving operations there. And there we found that there are structures which look like, means they are proper structures. Some are the rock cut. On the rock, there are proper stepped cuttings. And some looks like the built structure, like walls where the blocks have been joined together. So it made it clear that there were a structure. And there is a story, means this place was also called as Seven Pagodas. And the story says that earlier there were 7 temples, now only 1 is remaining. So that was clear. Then on the shore also, when we carried out excavation, we found remains of other temples, so that it was established that there were more temples. Some of them have been destroyed and have been submerged. So the legend has some history behind it, and there are structures which are lying underwater. And it was one of the it became very popular, famous. It was covered by media from all around the world because that was the year when the tsunami has occurred. One of the most important sites in India when we talk about underwater archaeology is Dwarka, a city which is mentioned in Mahabharata and said to be submerged in the sea. And here this site has been investigated by historians, archaeologists, underwater archaeologists for almost 100 years, since the Parjitar has mentioned in 1902. So 81 underwater archaeological work started here. And during that, some remains of structures were found. They are scattered in a large area and they are fragmentary. So finally, in 2007, we carried out underwater excavation here. Again, we have a very systematic, we have our own method following that first we explore the area because it has already been studied for by various agencies in the past. So we wanted to be very sure and to document everything, whatever is lying underwater. So with the help of surveyors, this is one of the survey boat, and here you can see these are the sonar equipments. So multi-beam sonar and echo sounders. So this whole area close to Dwarika town, on the background you can see the famous temple of Dwarikadhish. This is the modern Dwarika town, and this is the area. It was all surveyed using the latest equipment. And this is how you get the signals from the bottom. And these are the profiles which were made using different scientific tools. So an area around 2 nautical mile by 1 nautical mile, it was thoroughly explored, which is supposed to be the area where ancient settlement would have survived. And then we made a detailed hydrographic, this bathymetric sheet. So we captured all the data, and here we could find that there is a paleo channel. Right now a stream is here, but the paleo channel was here, so it shows that it has moved a little northward. And then we made the 3-dimensional terrain model to study the area. And after doing this all preliminary exercises, we started diving operations. In that also, first we had a larger area, we surveyed it, and then we focused on a smaller area where the concentration of structures was more. So it was also again properly laid out, marked, and then the diving was carried out. And there are a number of structures underwater which were properly cleaned, and you can see these remains. These are the stone blocks of very thick walls or a structure. They are all fragmentary. So you don't have like that houses or anything, but these scattered stone blocks are lying there. So they were all, again, the area where we carried out the work. It was properly documented, drawings were prepared, measurements were taken. That is what the archaeologists do on the site for documentation. So that was all done very systematically and thoroughly, and then these kind of grids were used for making drawings. And then we also carried out certain excavations near that, and then found that these structures are lying on the bottom of the sea, and they would have been a part of a very strong kind of or very thick walls, because keeping their shape and sizes in view. That is one impression generally people have, as I had mentioned earlier, that the people means when you talk about underwater archaeology or underwater cultural heritage, people generally think about the sea and the marine archaeology, what we call it. But that's not the case actually. This underwater cultural heritage is available not only in the coastal states or on the coast, but everywhere. It may be in the rivers, it may be in the lakes, and to break that kind of image, we decided to take up a project. This is Loktak Lake in Manipur. So that was the first work in a freshwater lake or in internal waters. And right from the Neolithic period, if those who know the history or archaeology of Northeast India, this area has been inhabited. And there are some islands in the lake which have been inhabited for a long, long time. And on the surface, you don't find these, you find scattered only these tools, polished tools and other objects, but no habitation or settlement has been discovered so far where you have a proper deposition. So therefore, we wanted to trace these settlements, and for that, we carried out diving operations near some of these islands. And it seems to be very promising that further study in this area can can bring out very important and well preserved material evidence of early phase of particularly in this region, which about which we don't know much. So that is the area where we conducted underwater operation. These are the small islands, and where we had a diving and underwater searches. So that was another project. When we talk about underwater archaeology, there are very few underwater archaeologists in India. Most of the people, they are not very willing to go underwater. Now, of course, the things are changing, and young archaeologists and historians are more enthusiastic. They want to do. But initially, it was very difficult to find people who are coming forward. And for that, training is important, because if one has to go underwater, he has to be a trained diver. Without diving, you cannot do anything. Sitting on the boat, you can't do underwater archaeology. And for that, we have carried out a few training programs in Archaeological Survey of India in collaboration with the various educational institutions. But much more has to be done. Whatever has been done have not produced the desired results, because India has got such a vast water area that we need a large number of trained underwater archaeologists. One way this diving is not very popular in India. So one way it helped so that all whatever is lying underwater is not disturbed so far. because in Western countries it has become a big problem because there are a lot of sport divers. They go to the different places, they dive and pick up the objects and disturb the sites. Since the diving is not popular, so that way our sites are well preserved. But at the same time, when you have to work, you find handicap because in such a vast area, only a few teams or institutions cannot take care of this all or cannot uh, means adequately address our problems and work. So we need people for to work offshore, and a lot of publications have come up in last these 40 years uh, in the means in the form of excavation reports, proceedings in the journals. So now we have got sufficient literature available about underwater cultural heritage in India, what all have been done, and beyond that, much more is to be done. There is another very interesting, as I had mentioned earlier, that we have a great scope for nautical archaeology. And the study of traditional boat building can be one such field where those who do not know swimming, those who do not want to go underwater, they can also work, means those who can work on the coast or in other areas can also contribute because we get evidence of these early boats right from the Harappan period. And it is not that only the Department of Archaeology can do it. Number means our universities, scientific institutions like the National Institute of Ocean Technology and Oceanography, our defense forces like Navy and Coast Guards, many other bodies like maritime boards, port authorities, marine police, they are the institution which all can play an important role. And if they work together, they collaborate each other, that can help a lot in bringing out or in the study and preservation of our underwater cultural heritage. The 2001 convention, which I had mentioned earlier, is a very useful piece of legislation, which not only helps in collaborating different states, but also it provides a framework. And the means annex to this convention was adopted by Archaeological Survey of India, means that India, you can say, in 2005 for implementation in the country. Of course, the India has so far not ratified this convention, but the rules are implemented by the Archaeological Survey of India. And it provides international standard how a project has to be framed and worked and how these things have been to be preserved. Recently, Niti Aayog has suggested and has given its recommendation for the development of underwater archaeology. Unfortunately, from 2009, I mean, so, well, roughly for last one decade, not much could be done. And there is a need, of course, when we talk about scope, it's enormous. But there is a need to do a lot in this field. And United Nations has declared this decade from 2021 to 2030 as a UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And I feel this is a right time that when many international bodies associated with underwater cultural heritage have been, means they have been working with them, they are the partners having projects, and that's the right time that India can also focus on underwater cultural heritage in this decade. And if we do that seriously, we have tremendous scope, we have a large water area, we have rich cultural heritage, we have got human resources, there is a need to train them and put them at the proper job. We can not only search them, and that will be really helpful in understanding the past. Because unless you study the underwater cultural heritage, only studying what is available on land, we cannot really reconstruct our history because our history is going to be incomplete unless we study these remains also. So the way ahead is that we need to have certain functional centers in coastal states. And Bengal, of course, was very rich and can be leading states which can do a lot in this area. Staff need to be trained, and we need proper training facilities because that's a must when somebody has to do something underwater. We, as on date, do not have any legislation for underwater cultural heritage. At present, only the legislations which govern the archaeological activities are being implemented because we know that any law of the land is also equally applicable in the territorial, means our water area. So they are being implemented. But if there is a proper national legislation, dedicated legislation that helps in uh, governing the activities there, and then the things can be streamlined. And the sharing of information and resources, that is vital because, as I have mentioned, we could not develop really because initially certain institutions tried to do everything their own, and that is a kind of thing what many people have in their mind. uh, it's not a good thing, but there are people who hesitate in sharing the information, sharing the data, and in isolation, no one can do good work. So there is a need of sharing of information and resources, and this 2001 convention, what I have mentioned about, also emphasis on that, that the various nations, the state parties, they share information, they share their resources for the protection of underwater cultural heritage. We will have to realize that Indian Ocean forms an important part of our cultural heritage, and everything cannot be just landlocked. So we will have to see what is underwater if we want to have a proper history or a holistic look of the things. Then we will have to look towards the sea or underwater. We'll have to go deep. There is a need to develop comprehensive strategies, which we will have to work out, and to raise more awareness of cultural significance of the oceans. I think with that, we can do a lot for in search, preserving, and studying our underwater cultural heritage. So I would stop with this. If there are any questions or comment, I would be very happy to take them.
Hello, Professor Tripathi.
Yes.
So this is a very interesting topic, and yeah, as you said, in isolation, no one can survive. That's the main important thing we have to learn. So I have a couple of questions to you. So when I first, as you have mentioned that this archaeology, I mean underwater archaeology, has been going on since last 100 years, perhaps. So, but like 5 or 6 years ago, I came to know about this. Do you not think that this lack of trained divers or interested participants is one of the reasons because this fascinating have not been included in school syllabus where this topic can be studied to all the children will get excited about this topic and join this area. What's your take on that?
No, I agree. It's not that 100 years for underwater archaeology. 100 years, I was mentioning about the work, means search or the identification of Dwarika in that context. But when we talk about underwater archaeology, it's from 80s. But you are right that most of the people, they do not know and forget about school. Even it is not included in the university syllabus, even in the archaeology syllabus, in the post graduation. So at many places, means many universities and institutions, they are giving postgraduate degree in archaeology, and where they don't teach or there is no proper information about underwater archaeology. So that is one of the reasons that people really do not know. And somehow it has been that people, I don't know, means generally right from the very beginning, people are told, means young kids, to stay away from the water, whereas they should have been encouraged to go, they should venture in the water and see on the surface as well as underwater. So we really don't train them in that way. And perhaps that was one of the reason that the Europeans came and ruled over us, because in that particular period, we were a great maritime nation in the past. But by that time, probably we could not concern much about our ocean fronts. So oceans were considered as a barrier in the North Himalaya and the South oceans. But oceans have been very active roads, and we should have our perspective like that. And lot more has to be done. You means I 100% agree that we need to have a change in our perception. And since you mentioned about school education, definitely the system what we are following is an archaic system. We need to change that. What is our need? Uh, and then only we can progress, really progress.
Okay. So again, Sir Himmat Bahadur Simant Gaikwadji, he has commented that Dwarka was a part of our kingdom, of princely kingdom of Baroda state, till 1952. My dynasty of the Gaikwadi rulers did not did lot of underwater investigation by using prevalent technology. Was very systematically documented. Nehru took away the records after we handed over our kingdom to the new regime. That's very unfortunate. Uh, and Party, one more question. Ask that when I heard about this underwater archaeology, so, then I was doing my master's. I was very fascinated, and I thought, "We do zoology and go for this. This is a new thing." And things do not go according to your plans sometimes. So I kept on studying zoology. But the thing is, what are the main challenges that you face while doing this underwater archaeology compared to the normal, I mean, non underwater archaeology? I mean, what are the major challenges that you face?
No, there is no, see, challenges. Water is a different medium. So altogether, it's a different world. So everything has to be special there. On the land, you can do the way you do every day, but there you have to be prepared for. Means it's also called the inner space. You have an outer space. The water is like an inner space. So there you have a breathing apparatus you need. Then for working, you need different kind of equipments, and that is one of the reason we means a different term is given to it, underwater archaeology. Because initially there was a lot of debates that archaeology is archaeology. So why it should be called underwater archaeology? So when any term underwater, marine, or anything is being used, it shows only the use of different techniques. In general, it's the process is the same what we do, but since it's a different medium where you cannot survive in a normal way, so then you need special techniques and special equipments. So that's the only difference, nothing else. And so that is what. Otherwise, of course, physical conditions means when you go deep, you have a lot of water pressure and all. You have to deal with that all. Otherwise, I don't see that it's anyway. Means there is no hurdle as such. And those who love adventure, for them it's beautiful. Means they enjoy it.
Okay, so sir, one last question from me. That is, if someone wishes to join this, I mean, marine archaeology, So, what is there any age limit that, or any specific course that a person should take in order to um, make a career in this path?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question because right now we do not have any separate opening for underwater archaeology as on date. Those archaeologists who are coming means those who come in archaeology can opt or can work in underwater archaeology in existing system. As on date, there is no such training available in our institutions in India where somebody is trained. Of course, there are some institutions they give diplomas and all, but they are just all theoretical. So there is no institution which is giving a proper training in underwater archaeology, and as such, there is no opening, separate opening for that is one of the reasons that that it could not develop. So that these are the issues which need to be addressed, and then we will have to work on these fronts.
Okay, so Professor Tripathi, thanks a lot for your valuable lecture. And I would urge all the audiences, those who are interested in marine archaeology and wish to make a career, should contact Dr. Professor Tripathi. Uh, so, okay, so thank you very much for your
Thank
insightful
you.
talk
Thank you.
on such an interesting topic. Yeah, thank you once again. Yeah.